section on gray divorce, there's a whole bunch of different types of divorce that I lay out. And the one where, why are you doing it now? Well, maybe there's been an age and stage issue, or maybe we waited till the kids got out of the home, or maybe we waited till the grandchildren moved across the country. Maybe it had to do with the fact that, he's retired and in my space constantly, and I'm going to lose my mind because he used to get up and go to work in the morning, or she used to get up and go to work in the morning, and now you're stuck together.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday is an award-winning program providing expert advice on issues related to older adults, their adult children, and anyone who works with or lives with elders.
Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village SF, providing services and support to older adults, and the Fromm Institute for Lifelong Learning. I'm Lynn Winter-Gross.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're talking about the talk. You probably have had the talk in your own family. Maybe it was on the day your child started school and you explained the importance of paying attention, as well as the joys of learning and making new friends. Or maybe it was when your kids were going on their first date and you had the talk about being aware, treating each other with respect, and staying safe. You talked and listened, and hopefully your kids understood the reasons for the serious talk.
But what might not have happened is the talk you want to have with your parents. As adult children, you may have noticed things about your parents' lives that seem to signal a need to step in and say something. Perhaps their house seems messier than usual, or it needs some age-proofing. Maybe one of them seems to have lost weight, or one seems confused when you visit. Whatever the signs might be, you probably know you need to have the talk and let them know you're there for their support and understanding. The conversations may not be easy, but at a certain stage, they're necessary.
Our guest today knows a lot about having the talk, especially as it relates to aging parents. Laura Tamblyn Watts is the CEO of Canada's National Senior Advocacy Organization. She's been a lawyer specializing in the rights of older adults and teaches law and aging at the University of Toronto. She's also the author of Let's Talk About Aging Parents, a real-life guide to solving problems with 27 essential conversations. And that's why we're talking to her today. The issues of aging are real, and it's time to talk about them. Laura, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Delighted to be here.
So one of the things I was interested in was the boundaries. You write about setting boundaries with your parents, and I would think that one might be a little guilt-inducing by itself because it's the reversal of a usual relationship we have with our parents. So how do we begin?
When I wrote Let's Talk About Aging Parents, I wanted to write for real families and real people, not that TV idea of families from the 1950s, Leave It to Beaver. If you've got mental health issues in your family, then you're normal. If you've got addictions issues, then you're normal. If there's second and third families, divorces, step cousins, all kinds of complexities, then you're normal. So I don't think that there is a normal relationship that you have. What we do is have a lot of words around what we say we want, and then the real actual evidence of what we really do want may be quite a bit different. What's most important is when you're thinking about what those points of intersection are going to be having with your aging parents, that you do it really, frankly, within the context of your own relationship with them and their family. Maybe you have a terrible relationship with your dad. It's not that you had a traumatic thing happen, but you just don't have a good relationship with him. You don't like him. He doesn't really like you, but they're great grandparents. He's an incredible grandfather. And so while you may not want to hang out with him, your kids have a different relationship. So how can you create some boundaries so that you and your dad aren't bonking heads, but that you're still facilitating a positive relationship as grandfather to grandchildren?
But let me ask you, if you have this kind of toxic relationship with your parents and they're okay with their grandchildren, how do you have a supportive relationship with them about their aging issues?
Well, you may not, and that's actually okay, right? The book talks about how to have conversations and try to figure out what it is that we're going to be doing together. At the most extreme side, we started talking about all the hard stuff. We're not talking about all the easy stuff, right? This is like the hardest stuff that we're talking about. You may acknowledge the relationship and say, I actually can't be involved in your care or your support. I'm not the right person. But what you may end up doing is helping with some of the finances from afar, helping with some online banking. Now, let's imagine a much nicer scenario, right? And a much more sort of contextualized family. Let's say that you live across the country from them and you're trying to figure out, look, I can't be there every day. Many times, an older adult will hear things like, well, just come in, move with me. I'm going to move you across the country. Yeah. And it usually comes from a place of great love and care. And it's almost always a bad idea, right? So part of what we're trying to understand is these ideas and fixed norms are not necessarily based in evidence and not necessarily based in good practice. Maybe what we start thinking about is, are you mostly worried about your mom falling? Are you mostly worried that she's socially isolated? Are you mostly worried that she can't drive anymore? So what is the problem that we're trying to solve for? And then let's create some good conversations and strategies to make those things better, as opposed to jumping to, I'm going to move you across the country. Just wait to see how well that's going to turn out.
Well, I think we need to back up a second because we haven't really talked about the setting for the conversation. Maybe it's different for each one of the subjects, but we've talked in the past on this podcast about having everybody sit down after Thanksgiving dinner or something whenever everybody in the family's there and talk about finances, like where do you keep your bank statements and who's your insurance broker, things like that. But this is more emotionally fraught, I would say. So could you describe the ideal setting and how to get the conversation started?
I do think you're dead on when it says it depends what the conversation is. So one of the things, particularly if you've got some red flags or things niggling for you that maybe things are not right, you want to have it at where they live, because you want to open the fridge and see if all the milk's expired. You want to go in and have a look at the living room, but look at that table beside that recliner chair. Does it have dentures and hearing aids in it? Are they actually living in the living room and sleeping in that chair and not actually in their bedrooms? Is it because they have urinary continence and can't get to the bathroom in time? Or is it because their body hurts so much that they need that curved type of chair environment? Those are things that you have to do to have a look at what's going on in the home. But by contrast, if you're having a conversation that maybe needs to feel like a step apart, I would say maybe do it during a walk or do it when you're at a restaurant or have a conversation in a neutral place. Do not have it at the family home where they may feel surrounded by their own things. We talked about your downsizing podcast. Maybe they will feel overwhelmed by having the conversation when they are surrounded by all of those things. So I do think choosing those times are important. The next thing I want to say is, I wrote this book for people between 35 and 75. It's not one conversation.
Let's talk about another difficult subject, though, that comes up. The gray
You hit all the
divorce.
hard stuff. Let's go for it. Let's do the hard things. I love it.
So let's talk about gray divorce. Many parents wait until their children are out of the house before they divorce, even if they've wanted to do it for many years. And those parents are probably in their 40s or 50s. But now parents who've been married 40 or 50 years are in their 60s and 70s, and they're splitting up, and they're probably not considering how their adult children might react. So what kind of conversation should this one be?
In the section on gray divorce, there's a whole bunch of different types of divorce that I lay out. And Miriam, you got that first one. The one where, why are you doing it now? Right? Well, maybe there's been an age and stage issue, or maybe we waited till the kids got out of the home, or maybe we waited till the grandchildren moved across the country. Maybe it had to do with the fact that, he's retired and in my space constantly, and I'm going to lose my mind because he used to get up and go to work in the morning, or she used to get up and go to work in the morning, and now you're stuck together. It may be because you have somebody who's got significant cognitive impairment and you still want a close relationship with that person, but you really can't be a spouse in the way where you might be physically intimate, you could be traveling together. Doesn't mean that you're divorcing them out of your entire life, but it may mean that you can't be married to them anymore. So the book goes through kind of the why now, what's the impetus? Let's be clear, there's just as many, 75-year-old guys who leave their wife for the yoga instructor, as there are people who say, I care about you, but I just can't be married to you anymore. I actually just can't do it. And then there's people who have, gender diversity. Sometimes people come out of the closet. It wasn't available for them to be in a same-sex partnership before, or even an alternative partnership before. Maybe they've been in a closet for 40, 50 years, and now is the time. There's also the I want to live my life type of it. Time is running out. I can't sit here on the sofa with you watching Jeopardy for one more minute. It was okay for a period of time, but now you're turning 70, you're turning 75, you're turning 80. You're like, the clock is ticking and I want to be backpacking through the Camino. I want to be going to a yoga retreat in Thailand. And this person, only thing that they care about is, as I say, like watching reality TV or game shows or whatever. And our differences are so profound that I just can't take it anymore.
So where does this leave the adult children in that conversation?
Usually in a mess, isn't it? Right? It's usually in a mess. Sometimes it's really in your face, right? Like you're out with the yoga instructor or the caregiver has now become the girlfriend and you're really worried about, is this a predatory relationship? Is someone getting taken advantage of? Now, look, for every caregiving one where things start feeling targeted, there may be the 80-year-old guy who wants to go to Vegas and get married and have a good time in the last 20, 30 years of his life too. So you have to kind of suss it out. Adult kids, if they are the sole provider of care for their individual parent, may feel really relieved that they've got somebody there on the ground. Maybe they feel conflicted about the relationship, but they're really happy to have someone in the house, right? So you got to try to figure out what is it we're trying to solve for. Many, many, many families are going to want to make sure that the finances are sorted out and that the wills are sorted out and try to better understand. But remember, as long as the older adult is mentally capable of doing things, it's their life to live. It's not yours.
Okay, how do the adult children have that conversation about the finances and the will?
Usually badly, right? Kids usually want to know, hey, what does this mean? But you have to not look like you're just out for yourself and you're just trying to make sure that you get all the stuff, right? So you might open up the conversation a little bit to see if they've done any thinking about it. Hey, I see that you guys are moving in together. That's, tell me all about that. Open up the conversation. Then move into some what ifs, right? Well, it's wonderful that you and Pat are together. It sounds like you're both really happy. I do note that you're 85 and Pat's 65. What if something goes wrong with either of you? What do you think would happen? And who would you want us to be involved with or connecting? Right? Let's start off with a gentle place. Then it'd be, have you guys thought about, are you formalizing this in any way? Okay, now we're getting down to that pathway. Maybe it's common law. Maybe it's a civil partnership. Maybe it's a marriage. There's probably some stuff we should sort out. Maybe is this a good time for us to start thinking, it's tax season's just been coming and gone, and I was declaring dependencies and trying to figure out life insurance and everything. Is that something that maybe we should do, considering you guys are now together, right? Opening up the topic of conversation. The other thing I would say is, read the room. Don't rain on their parade, right? There's nothing that becomes more sour than an older parent who's delighted in love and having the kid who comes off just sounding like all they want to do is make sure that this new person doesn't get any money, right? So celebrate, start talking about what would make sense, usually coming in through an event or taxes or something like that. Then you can always use the strategy about yourself. Wow, it's always so exciting when you're in that, romance stage and the getting married stage, but there's stuff to think about too. I'd love your advice. You in this relationship just prompted me to think about it. I guess it's been a few years since I've redone my will. Uh, do you have any advice on that? Right? Nobody likes to be challenged. Nobody likes to be told what to do. They just mostly don't. You're asking their advice. Oh, now all of a sudden we're in a safer place. Now we can do it. Don't go to the cottage and then ask the parents about the cottage because they're at the cottage, right? And the other thing I would say is, on the whole, don't do it anywhere near a family holiday, whatever it is you celebrate, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, whatever it is. Avoid them like the plague. This should be done not conflating family times and celebrations with serious conversations.
Well, what kind of conversation should one have with the grandchildren? I mean, I know grandchildren who have 6 grandparents already.
Sure.
So what do you do? All of a sudden, a new person is in their life. Do you say, this is a new grandma? This is grandpa's friend? I mean, how do you deal with it? Because kids are pretty smart these days.
Kids are and I would offer that it does depend on the age. I mean, if it's 2, like, they don't know anything about it, so it doesn't matter. That's not their job to figure that out, right? If they're 15, okay. So again, you can talk to the kids about it, and first of all, see if they get along. Like, on the whole, my advice generally is, like, read the room. If you're replacing someone, that's going to have sensitivity. If grandpa's always been alone and now there's a new person and you really like that person, start seeing what they would like to do. Sometimes people come up with fun nicknames or a play on name.
So since we're talking about difficult conversations, should we actually be asking our aging parents about sexually transmitted diseases? I've read that in some of the senior communities, it's rampant.
Oh, there's a whole chapter on it. Sex and your parents, right? And there's a one that says, do you have to think about the intimate details? Well, as much as you want. Listen, it's true. Many older adults, particularly in congregate settings like a retirement home or a seniors living or something like that, STDs are absolutely everywhere. And part of it is, think about the sex education, that has evolved over the years, right? Take that kind of classic idea. They got married at 21, right? In theory, they've been together a long time. No judgment about, whether they were always together or not always together, but just say they were always together. And then something has happened. Somebody dies or they're divorced and so on and so forth. So to the degree that any sex education did exist, it was probably around pregnancy planning. The other thing is, look, condoms can be hard to put on if you've got arthritis. So the book goes through kind of the hilarious things that, people do and ways around it and so on and so forth. The most important thing that I would say is that we really need to worry about consent. And this is especially true if you've got someone with some kind of fogginess or some cognitive impairment and you don't. And again, this is one of those areas where things get very difficult. We can't have substitute consent for sex or intimacy in that kind of in person. Does it mean you can hold someone's hand? Yeah, of course it means that. But if you're getting into bed together, if you are worried about whether or not they can consent, that's got to be a big red flag.
So what does the adult child say, though, in a situation like this? You can't say, Mom, are you sleeping with this guy? Are you protecting yourself? I know you can't get pregnant, but there's other things that can happen.
Yeah, you can. I mean, if you've got that kind of straight ahead relationship, go for it, right? If you can do that. I've got everything from that, and that tends to be more of a younger boomer generation where those conversations may have started. My family, my parents are 87. I mean, I can't even fathom having that conversation. It's just baffling to think about it, right? I mean, and yet really important if either of them was going to be in a scenario where you do that. You try to think about what the relationship is, what types of preventive measures might be appropriate. It's not only condoms, what activities that you may engage in. And if you think that older adults aren't having sex, I've got another thing coming for you. Absolutely, right? Over the age of 85, I confess the stats do drop off significantly for kind of good old fashioned, hit home base sex. But around those bases, those proverbial bases, intimacy and sexual connection are really important, right? There may be old fashioned, out of date, or just purely incorrect information about prevention of disease that you may need to kind of start doing it. Look, in the end, you could prompt the doctor if there is one. And you might even talk about to the other partner if you're having that kind of a relate. You maybe don't want to talk to your dad about it, but let's just say that you and the partner have a very open relationship. You might check in with them.
So moving away from a conversation about sex, what about a conversation about medical issues or legal issues? How much should adult children get involved in their parents' medical issues and finances?
It depends. I mean, that's the answer. So, for instance, you may be completely welcomed into the conversation about glaucoma or cataracts or macular degeneration, or maybe less invited to the one on hearing, right? And not invited at all on COPD because you are bugging your dad to stop smoking for 30 years. And he doesn't want to hear it from you that the reason why he's got COPD is because he didn't listen to your advice when you were a teenager and bugging him to do so, right? Remember, you as an adult child, and again, I use that term as inclusively and broadly as conceivably possible, you don't actually have a right to their financial information. You don't have a right to their legal information. You don't have a right to their health information. But if you have been appointed as a substitute decision maker, like as through a power of attorney, you do then have an obligation to make sure you make the right decisions, the decisions that they would want you to make. That opens up some responsibilities. Okay, well, you know what, Dad, I see that you've appointed me your power as attorney or your substitute decision maker for healthcare. I guess we should talk about your health. So trying to be in service to supporting your parents' values, wishes, and beliefs is a much more effective way of doing it.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about grief. And how do we support the surviving parent or surviving aunt or uncle and still grieve ourselves? I have to tell you, an adult child I know lost her mother, and she said to me, everybody's giving all their sympathy to my father. They're not thinking of me. I lost my mother. He lost his wife, true, but I lost my mother. And I feel like I'm not getting any of the support or sympathy that I need. So how do we deal with grief in this kind of situation?
Grief, I think of as amplitudes. And actually, any kind of grief. It could be grieving over loss of a job. It could be grieving over loss of a marriage, or it could be the loss of a person in our life. It's not a straight ahead thing. So I think about sort of amplitudes, wavelengths. So I think part of what's important to remember is some people will express their grief at different times and have their need to receive help and support more sharply than others. It's natural for that first person to them to reach out to is that sort of spouse or partner. It doesn't obviate the fact that you've lost your mom. And even if you're 65 and your mom is 95, you've still lost your mom. For many adult children, I've heard time and time again, I'm an orphan now. And I think that's an interesting thing to say in your 60s, right? It's not, but it's that sense of loss. When I think about when we talk about grief, giving people the space to share is really important. Not avoiding it is really important. And I think that many people, again, talked about earlier, like very uncomfortable conversations, so they slide away from it. One of the best ways in to share people about their grief and acknowledge the changes in their lives is to share stories and photo albums and so on. It's really important to remember that services, whatever that is, whether they be religious or celebrations of life or just people over to the living room, those are for the living, they're not for the dead. And a rich life is led usually at many connective points. So even going around the room and having people tell stories is one of those ways of acknowledging loss and getting support in return.
Well, thank you so much for giving us all a head start on having the talk. Our guest was Laura Tamblyn Watts, author of Let's Talk About Aging Parents. Today on News You Can Use, we're going to talk about another way to improve our health by hobbies. Developing new hobbies or re-engaging with a former hobby that gave us joy as a young person might just be the right thing to do today. A recent Harvard study examined nearly 100,000 adults over the age of 65 and found that people who engaged in hobbies had higher life satisfaction than those who did not. This was true across all 16 countries included in the study.
The report highlights a number of beneficial hobbies, including gentle activities like gardening, crafts, painting, singing, volunteering, and joining social clubs, to more intense physical activities like tennis or walking. Hobbies help us unwind, find new friends, and stay active. They stimulate our imagination, self-expression. They provide social support and reduce loneliness.
Trying to find a new hobby might feel overwhelming. The researchers advise trying something manageable, like attending only one art exhibit, or trying a new book club, taking piano lessons, joining a writing, art, or travel group, or planning something with a friend. If you live in a community with a garden, just planting seeds, watering the plants, or weeding comes with benefits. To add a bit of a challenge, study different plants that grow best in your climate and learn the best time to plant or let them rest.
Before you start trying many different hobbies at once, remember all the articles you read about overprogrammed children and try not to become overwhelmed. While we encourage involvement, remember there should be enough time in your day to play. It's not good to become stressed about your leisure time just when you really want to have time to relax, enjoy new things, and be available for spontaneous activities.
A hobby should be challenging, but not so that it makes you feel stressed. And it may take a few tries to find something that clicks. Find the middle ground between a high-impact schedule and quiet time, and beware of leisure burnout. Your hobby should be a diversion and not measured by its usefulness or value to others. Second and third careers are often born out of interests that began as hobbies.
Remember, it's okay to switch hobbies, especially if you find you don't enjoy one that you thought you did 20 years ago. Your playtime should fit your needs, and you can change your needs at any time.
The bottom line is finding something that brings you pleasure. And when you find a hobby that is engaging, stick with it. It's good for your mental, physical, and emotional health.
And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks to our guest, Laura Tamblyn Watts, author of Let's Talk About Aging Parents. You can learn more about Next Village SF at their website, nextvillagesf.org. And check out the FrommInstitute.org, which offers a wide range of learning opportunities for older adults. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstadt is our engineer. Shannon Greavy of A Bigger Room is our social media consultant. And thank you for listening. We would love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. All of these are free and help us know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.